There we go. Okay, Caitlin Abbott.
Nicole Matson.
Rachel Huff.
Sweet. Okay, so the first question. So we were supposed to have researched something you're interested in and then talk about why the government got involved in this issue, if it's been effective, and based on George Will's speech, how could the government be doing, or what could the government be doing right now to make the situation more effective? Well, for mine, I think I read both of yours about what you researched for the other discussion board, but for mine, I did people with mental disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And there he is. Hi, Shane. Is he with us?
He muted his
There
mic.
he is. Okay, sweet. So Shane, we just started. I was just reading through the first questions. So I guess I'll just go over mine real fast. I did the people with mental disabilities, and mostly they got involved because there were other programs, but they weren't very effective for this particular. And I felt like it was somewhat effective.
Did the same one. The same one.
Yeah, I saw that. I think we did. I researched a different program. I did SSDI, something.
Okay.
But it was for this people.
I think I did IDEA. I think that's what it was.
So I don't know. Do you guys want to talk about what yours were?
Yeah, that's fine. I researched healthcare. So like the ACA, why can't I think of the name now? But
Affordable Care Act.
Yes, that one. Or Obamacare is what they call it. And so I researched how that kind of like affects today's society. Am I supposed to talk about how he incorporated it in the video? I don't think so, right?
I don't think so.
Okay, not yet. Right. And they got involved in this issue because it was health insurance wasn't as available to like lower income families as it's supposed to be now. But it kind of helped, but at the same time it kind of didn't, because there's a lot of illegal immigrants, which is a problem. So it's still a big problem, but they've been able to help a lot more people. That's what I got from it.
I did deaf people, and honestly, it was kind of hard to find very specific things about them, like how they've been helped. And so, I mean, I found things here and there about it, but all I got really was that the government said they needed to help them just because, it's a reality that there are deaf people. There was a few websites that talked about, parents who stood up for their children, especially in school settings, where the child couldn't understand what was going on and wasn't receiving the same education because the teacher, didn't speak sign language. And then some of it I drew from, like, I know a couple of deaf people in our ward, and they, have had problems before with, like, school, and their education because no one knew sign language. But honestly, like, from what I found, I'm not saying the government's perfect with their help, but there's a lot more things that are helping, whether it's, instruction videos having subtitles, or it's you can have, a special helper or caregiver that, like, there's definitely room for improvement, but I definitely think that the government is trying to do something about it and trying to further it. At least that's what I found. But like I said, a lot of when I was researching it was a lot of just like the science behind how people become deaf or how they're born deaf. And it was like, well, I need like the political behind it, which is kind of weird sounding.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, nothing.
Okay. Let's see. So then it says, according or based on George Will's speech, what could the government be doing right now to help the situation more effectively? Well, for the one I did, one of the problems with the SSDI, so it's like they call it social disability income. And one of the biggest issues with it was that each case was reviewed by just like a worker, not by like a medical professional. So, I mean, like it was reviewed by someone who couldn't make an accurate I don't know, decision, I guess, on whether or not this mental disability was real and how severe it was and all that. And then it was really difficult to like get into the program. And I feel like people with these disabilities already have a hard time, you know, and obviously people take advantage of the system. And so that's why they have to it's like Medicaid, like it's really complicated and difficult to work with because people take so much advantage of it that they have to beat out people that like don't really need it, I guess. So that was one thing the government could be doing, was having someone who actually is qualified reviewing the cases, as well as there's one other thing it did. Oh, they had to meet certain requirements, like work requirements. But I mean, if it's somebody born with a disability, like they wouldn't have been able to work to meet these requirements before. So I don't really know how that worked, but it just seemed like there was a lot of good that it was doing, but there were a lot of little hiccups along the way that they could have been working on.
So for George Will, in his speech, he actually discussed healthcare in there, and he basically said that the government shouldn't really be doing anything for people that need healthcare. And I kind of agree with that. I've talked to a lot of people that like don't have health care because they like have their own businesses or whatever. It's harder to find health care, and they say a lot of the time it's cheaper to pay for their health care having no health care than having Obamacare and paying for like their co-pays and everything. Like it's so much more expensive, so they'd rather just have no health care and pay for it. So I thought that was really interesting, to find that it's not as effective as obviously he wanted it to be. And I think George Will, I think he was saying that like it's better for the people to be able to handle that for themselves, because a lot of that stuff is already done with like businesses and stuff. So I don't know. I just don't feel like Obamacare is very effective.
Could you guys go over the question one more time? What question are we answering?
Yeah, so in regards to the topic that you studied for the previous discussion board, it just says, based on George Will's speech, what could the government be doing right now to help this situation more effectively? So whatever program you studied, what could the government be doing to help it more effectively?
Huh. Well, it kind of sounded like, based on what you said, that anything. That's kind of so I guess nothing. I would think that he'd be on the side of like private schools and stuff, but like his topic wasn't really related to what I researched. But what do you think? Like, how did you
No, I kind
And
of
did you
agree.
connect it?
I felt like I don't know, maybe there was like Nicole said, it's almost a healthcare thing, I feel like, but
Right.
sort of. And I don't know, I kind of got the feeling from his talk that mostly the government is too involved in everything. And so
Right.
if programs aren't working, then maybe they need less involvement in what they're doing. And
Right. And
I
it
don't
sounds
know.
like we just can't afford all the things we want the government to do. We have this big wish list for things we want them to do, but there's just not enough money.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, I feel like if more people were willing to help in the community, then it would be better, kind of like the law of consecration. Okay, so
Right. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, so these people in the community realize that there's people that are deaf or have mental disabilities or need health care, and they do the work to help them out rather than rely on the government to do everything because we're already in so much debt, and all these things
Right.
for us is just going to make the debt worse, I guess.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know. It's kind of hard to relate my topic to his speech. And I know that I read from a lot of like testimonials that the deaf community, they were saying that they kind of get swept under the rug sometimes. People focus on other disabilities that people have, but really, like, you know, I think the government knows what's going on. But, going even if it's something simple as just learning a few sign language. Like, oh, this sounds terrible. My neighbors are deaf. I don't know how to talk to them at all, and I've never learned. And now I sound like a really crappy person as I'm lecturing how we need to help these people, and I'm like the biggest hypocrite of them all. But like, I should know this stuff. I'm their neighbor, and we've lived next to each other for a long time. So maybe not so much the government changing, but just how individuals in society change and what they can do.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like we said, if the government pulled back their involvement, then maybe the community would step up more, and individual societies would put more effort into helping each other than just, well, the government can take care of that. Okay, the next question says, Dr. Will cites a problem no one wants to talk about. And then the question is I don't know how to say this guy's name, the ecology, whatever model we talked about last week. How is this issue impacting children and families, communities, and our nation? I don't know if we're still talking about individual issues or just more, because I think we've all kind of come to the consensus that the government is maybe too involved. But I think it affects all of these things, like when we talked about the pact or whatever, having the government basically be in charge of your parenting. They're getting too involved and becoming too engrossed in our lives, which is going to affect how we parent our children and how the kind of environment our children are raised in. They're becoming very involved in how a family is defined. And I don't know, I think it affects on kind of a fundamental level because like the Declaration says, it's up to the people, we the people choose these things, but right now we the people are giving it to the government to take care of, and it's backlash.
I think last time we talked about how was it? That we ourselves are not as involved as we should be. Like in the election, we're now worried about politics, as before it was just like, oh, whoever wins, wins. But now it's kind of like our butt is on the line and we can't really, I don't know, we feel like we can't really do much about it because we've kept saying we can't do anything. And I thought it was really interesting because in the video he was talking about how one of the guys was like, well, casting your vote on a ballot can change, everything. But then he kind of came out to the point where he goes, no, it's not your vote that counts. It's the ideas in your head, basically, that count for something. And I kind of liked how he said that, like, not everything is reliant on who the president is, but at the same time, like, we have to work better with the government. I don't know. I think that's kind of the point of this class, is to advocate for what we believe in. And so if we think that there should be less government involvement in our lives, maybe we should speak up and, say something about that.
I think you're right. I mean, he talked about it's not because we all voted on this one person that these things change. It's because these individuals had individual ideas that they did something with, and they made the effort and got involved and changes. But it wasn't because they voted for Obama, Okay, do you want to move on to the next one? Is that okay?
With regards to the question, I was going to say schools came to mind, and how the government's really involved in what's taught in schools, and like kind of like what they can and can't even, and it's like they're kind of defaulting on atheism as like that's like kind of what they teach in schools. It's all scientific and stuff, and so that's definitely something that the government did that they probably shouldn't be so involved in. Should be, somehow more neutral, but it seems like they're getting less and less neutral.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like they do that to appease, a small group of people to try and create neutrality in schools or whatever, and it ends up just leaning towards the opposition. It's those few small voices that spoke up, and now instead of having a Christmas party at school, you have happy holidays, or there's no Halloween party, it's the harvest party because three parents complained about it.
You're restricting people's, beliefs and stuff by not letting them say Merry Christmas and things like that. So it's really more restrictive.
I think part of it too is we talked about, the standardized testing in schools. And Shane, you brought up schools, and I think that the government has way too much involvement in the school education. And George Will talked about that a lot too, is how education is like a huge part of what we kind of become. And if the government's too involved, that means they're trying to manage our education, and they're trying to manage who we become. And who said they have a right to, make us who we are? It's kind of a scary thought. And so, I don't know.
That's a really good point. It's slowly but surely headed that direction, I think. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to say on that?
No, I definitely agree with what you guys said, though.
Okay, so the next question says, according to Dr. Will, one thing you can do for your country is reserve a spacious portion of your life for which your country is not responsible. Reflect on what you've learned and discussed this week, and then respond to the following. Do you you agree with Dr. Will, and in what areas do you personally feel the government should be involved and should not be involved in addressing your chosen threat to children and families? I personally agree. I mean, in the church, we're taught that we shouldn't be commanded in all things, and so it's the same with the government. They shouldn't have to dictate every aspect of our lives. And the threat I chose to family and children was purposeful childlessness. And I think the government is way too involved in that with all of the, what's it called? Abortion rights and all that. And I think that's, a personal thing not that I agree with abortion at all, but I almost feel like it's going to get to the point where, isn't it Hillary Clinton or someone that is all for like late term abortion, and like it's going to get to the point where we are going to have to, I almost feel like we're going to have to defend having kids, because so many people are pro-choice, or it seems that way at least. And so yeah, I feel like there are a lot of aspects, especially concerning the family, that the government is way more involved in than they should be, and that I think we need to have the basic rights, obviously, like the Constitution says, are inalienable rights that don't infringe upon others, but sorry, she is wiggling so much. But yeah, within the family, I think you should have decisions that you make, that I choose to celebrate Christmas, or I choose to have my kids, start doing chores at a young age. And that's personally what I feel is right for my kids. As long as it's not harmful to them. But at this point, it's like you can't even give your kid one spanking without getting child services called on you, and that's, I feel like, something they do not need to be nearly as involved in as they are.
Yeah, I agree with you too, and I agree with what George Will said in his speech. And I feel like we talk about children and family, and they are so involved, and they are also involved in the definition of what family is. And who has the right to tell us what the definition of family is? Like, isn't that our own personal or religious opinion? Why should the government be involved in opinions? Because I honestly think, obviously the definition of family goes to God, and his definition is what's best and what is true and right. But here, obviously, in this earthly state, in this worldly mind, it's definitely an opinion. The definition of family is definitely opinion, and I don't think the government has a right to tell us what our opinion should be. So I definitely think they're too involved in schools and the definition of family, and whether or not we should have kids, and whether or not we should be able to have abortions. I just don't think they should have a say in any of that. And I think George Will brought up a good point when he was talking about how the government is supposed to protect and secure our rights. They're not supposed to tell us what to do. They're just supposed to stand there and protect our rights. And they're starting to tell us what our rights are instead of trying to protect them. So I don't know, that's kind of my view on things.
I agree with everything you guys have said. That one of the things is that it gets annoying is you were saying that the government shouldn't tell us our opinions, tell us what we think about certain things. And there are times that we express our opinions, and somehow in society it's gotten to the point that if you express your opinion or say you think of something like this, it is insulting the people who don't agree with you, and that's just not the case. That, a really stupid example of it that has nothing to do with, politics or anything is if I said that I like cats and someone said, oh, that means that you obviously hate dogs. And it's like, I didn't even say anything about that. I just said, you know, one opinion. So yeah, and I think that, well, honestly, in some ways I feel bad for the government because they're trying to help us, and there's so many complaints that come out from people saying, oh, well, this offended me or this upset me, and you know, they're scrambling to help those people. And to be fair, there's a lot of ugly things in the world. I'm not trying to say that the, you know, people who have different views than me are all, you know, whiny babies, because they're not. But then, you know, I don't know, it doesn't feel like true equality because the scale tips to one side or it's tips to the other side, and instead of just saying, okay guys, we're gonna sit back and you guys figure this out, you know, obviously as long as nothing's getting violent or anything, but you guys need to respect that you each have your own rights and your right to opinion, and as long as it doesn't interfere with someone else's rights, you should be able to do what you want to do, kind of deal. And I think that goes, you know, all sorts of ways. That goes, you know, I don't care what side of the political team you're on, it goes everywhere. But yeah, I completely agreed though with what you were saying about them kind of taking a step back, and I agree with the quote too from Dr. Will.
I think you made a great point when you said I mean, you feel bad for the government because these people keep coming to them. I think, yeah, we complain a lot about all the power the government seems to have, but we gave them that power. I mean, it's not like overnight they just came in and said, well, we're going to start doing all this and this, and you have to listen. We kept going to them with our issues instead of trying to solve them ourselves and getting them to make it, you know, a policy or a law or whatever. And so it's not like the government took all this power from us. We gave it to them mostly willingly.
Like one of the things that he said was that the great thing about our country is that our Constitution doesn't tell us what our government has to do for us, but rather what our government can't do to us. I feel like in a lot of ways we've kind of overstepped that, and we're a lot of things that really shouldn't be, you know, up to the government.
Well, like I said earlier, I mean, a lot of what he said was kind of over my head just because I'm not government oriented at all, but I feel like he made it seem so easy. Like, here's the problem, here's the solution, you know? Like, why can't we figure that out? I really do think a lot of it is if we put the effort in and took the time to be involved ourselves, and rather than turn to the government, you know? It's like learning to be an adult. Okay, something breaks, but I am married and live on my own, so I have to figure out how to fix it now instead of call my mom to come and fix it for me. You know, we don't need to rely on the government for everything, but we're kind of headed that way.
We just kind of see the government as the solution to all of our problems. Fix things.
Anything else anyone wants to add real fast? Okay, so to kind of summarize, for all of the programs we researched, there seemed to be a little bit of both good and bad from the government involvement. It didn't really seem like there was any that were totally a great program and that the government was doing this wonderful thing for us by doing this. And basically it just kind of came down to we need to be more involved on an individual level and a society rather than going to the government, and that there should be parts in our lives that are dictated by us as individuals rather than than relying on a government to tell us what to do or what we should be doing. And with their micromanagement involvement, I guess it has an effect on our families and our children, and yeah, they're starting to tell us what our opinion needs to be instead of like he talked about in his talk, or rather than us telling them what our rights are and them defending them, it's kind of, the tables have kind of turned. Is there anything else I missed in the summary that we want to add real fast?
I think that's all. I think it's just that we all agreed kind of with George Will's viewpoint, and how the government is too involved, but also how we kind of let them be involved because we took our problems to them when we should have just kind of dealt with them.
All right. Well, then I guess
Everything.
Yeah. I guess that's it for this week. Any last words?